it's all about living a good life.
I first met Bev in May of 1976. That meeting and Bev is etched in my understanding and identity about who I am. It changed my life, and it changed so many people's lives. I began work for the state of New Hampshire at that point in time. It was the bicentennial year of this country, and to me that describes this moment in time where people were stepping forward and saying, this is who our country is, this is who we are, and this is how we should live. These are the things we must do. And Bev is the person that stands out for me as having the strength of character and the clarity of vision, the integrity, the personal integrity, to have been able to stand up at that point in time and say, this is who we all are. This is what it is to be a family. This is what it is to be a community. And this is what we must do. As you can see, Bev had an impact on me. The work that we were doing at that time was to try to understand the conditions at Laconia State School, the capacities of our community, and the nature of how one should support individuals with disabilities. And in doing that work, Bev was the individual who had approached that larger conversation, having first organized families and worked with what I think then was called the Manchester ARC. Using our vocabulary of that day, it was the Association for Retarded Children, if I remember correctly, and quickly evolving that name and that understanding to say, wait a sec, retarded citizens, wait a sec, this is the MARC, this is the more center, and really helped us change our thinking and move us through an understanding of what our community capacities were. Bev had organized families. She had advocated on behalf of her own family, but really on behalf of many, many more families, and had approached school districts, approached churches, approached others, and said, can we come together and make things occur that have never been here in our communities? And they responded. Bev was a leader, and she led her community. She was the person that they saw as knowing the right thing to do. She had a very powerful voice and a clear understanding of individuals and their needs, and people followed her. And in meeting a person like that, as a young person, new in a role, new in employment as an adult, that was a wonderful thing for me, and it really shaped my understanding of what it is to have integrity in a profession, what it is to be responsible for individuals and their rights, the social justice under which they and the state government communities respond to them. In working with Bev over those coming months and years, quickly the defining moment became the filing of the Laconia State School lawsuit. Bev was one of the families who had worked with New Hampshire legal assistants and others to raise the issue, to start putting in front of all of us those fundamental issues of how are we treating individuals with disabilities? What does it even mean to have a disability? What do we think we're doing here? What are the conditions at the state school, and what must we do about them? Bev was one of the witnesses for the plaintiffs in what was then the longest civil trial in New Hampshire's history. And the press had started out really saying, what are these people even talking about? Laconia State School is a major commitment. What do they think that they should be asking for? And shouldn't we defend the state school in order to defend individuals with disabilities? Bev spoke to the press and with the other families quickly turned the public conversation in the middle of this very public trial into one of saying a terrible injustice has been done and is being done. And we must not just rethink this, we must recommit ourselves. And my role was to be a witness for the defendants. And it really kind of described Bev's and my relationship in many interesting and wonderful ways. We had a creative tension in our relationship. Hers was representing the voice of the plaintiffs. Mine was trying to figure out how to help the defendants understand what is going on, because it was a surprise to many, many people, and how to think their way to a new way of working, a new future, and yet at the same time represent the state in this effort. And Bev's integrity was that she knew why she was doing this. She knew the story of all of the families, and she knew the right thing to do. And it was not a problem for her that there were plaintiffs, there were defendants, etc. The question was, how do we create a moment in time here where we can reverse this direction, where we can reverse course, and where we can make something happen that has never happened before in this state or in this country. And for Bev to have started with the organizing of families, with the opening of the first services really in the state, and to help represent the families in this fashion, that was an extraordinary thing. Representing a person who really not just has beliefs, but who can and does effectively act on them in a way that leads people to follow, that makes people want to become a better self, to understand what they can be and what their communities can be. That is the role that she played. For me, as a new person newly arriving to a profession, it was inspiring, it was awe-inspiring, and it allowed me to understand the standards of how this profession must work. It influenced everything I did from that point forward. How are we doing? So, this is who she was. This is what I must say. The decision by Judge Devine in the Laconia School lawsuit was not, it was very clear in finding the state clearly at fault of a terrible injustice. But it was not directed as to how that change, what the change must be or how it must occur. In his wisdom, he turned back to us all, plaintiffs and defendants, and said, come forward with a plan. Tell the federal court what is the right thing to do. And we will consider it, and ultimately did order it to be the actions, set of actions that the state and communities in New Hampshire would take. In receiving that clarity of responsibility and the flexibility to work together, it really was an opportunity for Bev and I to sit down, for our communities really to come together and sit down and to say, how do we approach this challenge? And our first set of actions was to turn to our communities and say, how can we empower communities to do the kind of things that we've seen coming out of the Moore Center, that we've seen Bev be able to do in Manchester? How can we take the strength of that work and use that as our building block? And so we designated the Moore Center as the area developmental services agency for the greater Manchester area, and sought other entities, groups like that in other communities. But it was clear in Manchester that we had Bev's strength to build on, that we had the work that had already been accomplished as our foundation stone, really, for establishing a community service system in New Hampshire. And in working with Bev, it was also clear that we had someone who always would be suspect of the state of New Hampshire, and I mean that in a very positive way, as she should have been, and as everyone should have been. It was always a case of demonstrate to me the integrity of your work. Show me that these are well thought out plans. Show me that these are plans that you will stand behind and not just suggest to a community that it would do, but these are things that will be funded, supported, and appreciated for the long term. What we understood was that when we did that, the Moore Center, Bev Arel, was someone we could rely on to accomplish these things. And in terms of correcting conditions at Laconia State School, we had to be able to rely on these things. And so it really created an understanding of the bond that had to exist, the relationship that had to exist between the partners in the New Hampshire developmental services system, the world of services that would be developed and the care that would be provided. Having that standard set was critical to our success. People understood and could rely on the rules of how we would maintain the set of responsibilities that we have, and really Bev showed the way to that. The Laconia State School lawsuit was in many ways just the beginning. It led to a period of time where speaking to the needs of individuals was something that became very honest, where individuals with behavioral health needs in addition to their developmental service needs, individuals with complex health conditions, etc., individuals that really required personal understanding and what we came to call person-centered care was the way in which we would organize the work that we did. And Bev was a person who first and foremost understood the position of the individual with the developmental disability, the position of the family in that. And so for us to do person-centered care, we absolutely depended upon that understanding. That was the starting point, that was the ending point. What was the experience for them in the work that we did? And once again, we found Bev setting really the stage for how the work of the developmental services system would be carried out. Her commitment to individuals was unwavering. What I think few of us were really prepared for was the incredible challenge of managing the operations of a very complex service delivery system. What started with organizing and advocacy, what started with public representation and demonstration of what should be done, ultimately became the work of management and executive administration of very complex, high stakes, many employee settings. And Bev took on that role again in a way in which she demonstrated the integrity of that work. And the Moore Center and the work ultimately done by area agencies across the state was deeply influenced by the standards that were set in the work at the Moore Center, the work under Bev's direction. Her role as chief executive her role in working with a community was exemplary in the sense that it taught us all how not to make the boldest statements, but rather how to be the most reliable entity to say, this is the work we can do. Our community will support us in that work. We will be able to assure that the employees that will be hired and will provide the care, that they will have the skills and capability and understanding of that work. We will have the assurance that we will be able to engage with employers and find people new roles in life. And that ability to say, I can manage a complex organization and I can do so embedded in a community. That was the thing that Bev never failed to demonstrate for all of us at all levels and across all of the area agencies. And that too, again, was the awe-inspiring aspect of the change that Bev dreamed of, the change that Bev imagined and told to others, the change that Bev ultimately spoke to and led and ultimately delivered on as the key to the area agency system in the state. My life was influenced from the beginning, and the work that I did was always work measured by the standards of Bev's expectations. And the good news is, I think much of the time I lived up to it, but when I didn't, I could always count on Bev speaking up and saying, no, 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 this is what we must do. That's it.